coming. I'd like to bring the meeting to order and ask that roll be called.
Blue. Here. Bozeman.
Here.
Disharoon.
Here.
Holzhauser. Here. Humbles. Here. Reed. Here. Sauer.
Here.
Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The board will now move on to the public participation portion of the meeting, and Dr. Dearman will begin with the superintendent's report.
First, I got 4 items. First item, usual business BOE requests. I had 2, one from the Illinois Retired Teachers Association, pretty standard. They asked, which teachers or administrators we have retiring every year, so we gave them that information. And then Damon had one other request. Don't ask me to name the institution, but it's a financially based one.
That's Smart Approach.
Yes, one of those. So we took care of those. Next item, CSCI, this parent survey that was given at many of the parent nights. We just received the results from the survey and are in the process of analyzing those now. We will have a presentation for the board at the February meeting. Recently I was on the news about the D squared, D2, basically that's the name Peoria Public Schools gave it, the dual degree program. In a 30-second, 10,000-foot overview, basically what can happen is that a Dunlap High School student could earn their high school diploma and simultaneously be attending Illinois Central College and earn their associate's degree. So the last day of their high school career in May, they come across the stage. I could literally hand them high school diploma with one hand and their associate degree in the other. And we're working with ICC. We've had a couple meetings with them so far. The last meeting I had Matt Andrews, well, those 4 in the front, Heather, Damon, and Scott Adrian there to start working through logistics of how we're going to make this happen. It's certainly doable. There's some questions, some things ICC doesn't quite understand about high school requirements, but we just want to make sure we have all our ducks in a row. Because the last thing we want to have happen is roll this out without having thought it through thoroughly and then get to the end of that senior year and say, here's your associate's degree, you did that program, but we forgot you needed this requirement for high school and they don't get their high school diploma. So we're being very careful to make sure we cross all our T's and dot all our I's so that our ducks in a row. We have another meeting next week, so we will have more information on that as we progress. We have the DLT meeting coming up next week. Information has already gone out about that, so I'm excited to get that group back together and start looking at some action plans on the ideas that they brought forth. And then the last item, I guess I do have 5. I'm a little ahead of the game, but that's okay. The April board meeting is when we would seat the new board. The election, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie, is April 3rd, 2nd. Thank you. Our board meeting is scheduled for the 17th. They have to have the election results to us by the 23rd, which would be after our board meeting, so we could potentially have a board meeting and then just have another one, a special meeting, just to seat the new board. My suggestion, and we've done this before, is just let's bump that April meeting back 1 week, and we won't have a meeting really just to meet. And it's pretty typical, pretty standard. I've done it before. And obviously, the current board would take care of any action before the new board. We wouldn't ask new board members to be voting on bills they hadn't even seen, those types of things. So does anyone have any issue with that?
The only thing is if we have to vote on something, there's 4 seats up for election. So we'd only have 3 sitting members, right?
The full board would still see their...
The current board.
Current board.
Okay, gotcha.
It'd
Okay.
be just a regular meeting. Once we conclude our regular meeting, then we would go into the process of seating the new board.
I'm sorry. I did that accidentally. I'm trying to turn my phone off.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's all I've got for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll move on to public comments. I believe there's someone here to address the board. Are there others that would like to address the board? Please raise your hand. Okay. One person, okay.
Before you address the board, I just need to go through our policy. Before addressing the board, I'd like to remind you of our process. Per board policy 2230, we ask that when addressing the board, please identify yourself and be brief. Comment shall be limited to 5 minutes. The speaker is asked to please conduct oneself with respect and civility toward others. Individuals less than 18 years of age are permitted to address the board if accompanied by his or her parent or guardian. The board typically does not engage in two-way conversations during the public portion of the meeting. Any follow-up response will be addressed by the administration at a later date. To be respectful of others and to protect confidentiality, complaints against individual students, staff members, or board members, either named or unnamed, shall not be orally presented to the Board of Education. Such complaints should be put in writing, signed by the person or persons making the charges, and delivered to the Board of Education Secretary. So at this time, if you could please introduce yourself, and you may begin. Thank you.
Anything like that last part. Greetings board, greetings attendees. We're here to present for our local company, CNST, or College Nannies, Sitters, and Tutors. And I don't like to give a resume, but Yasmin and I are going to do so to give you some basis so you understand who we are and why we were hired for our positions and why we're here today. So I was a professional English teacher for 15 plus years here in Peoria area as well as in District 214 Chicago. I have a master's in educational leadership and curriculum. I taught ACT/SAT for over 15 years. I privately tutor. And more importantly, and probably most importantly, I worked for ETS, aka College Board, who makes our high-stakes standardized testing. And so I was the lovely lady that made distractor questions that kids love so greatly when they get down to that 50-50 answer. So, Yasmin?
Hi, I'm Yasmin Masadev. I actually went to Dunlap High School a few years ago. I see some familiar teachers and my former counselor. Hello. I went on to graduate at Bradley University, studied public relations and social media marketing. I began working with CNST initially as a tutor, worked my way up into the marketing department, and now I'm marketing director. So we're happy to share some of the things we've been working on, things that we're hoping to progress into working with schools, and so Joanna's going to get into that.
We are dual businesses that focus on creating stronger Dunlap Peoria communities as well as happy and successful students. We're primarily here to talk about both of those. We do that through 2 ways, tutoring and then in-home care. Both of our services have already been beneficial to the Dunlap area. Most of our families, about 9 out of 10 of our 400 plus families are actually what I call Dunlapian families, so within this zip code. We currently tutor over 40 students regularly, and most of those students are Dunlap students. That doesn't include drop-in services or any add-on students. And how we're different is we create a customized, holistic approach. So that means that I personally meet with every single family, all the students. I create an individualized learning plan, and we connect that learning to things that are going to make that student learn better, aka most of our students who are coming to us are trying to succeed more within the classroom or to meet enhancement needs like performing better on the ACT/SAT. We do also offer in-home childcare. How that helps you as a board or fellow teachers, possibly in the audience or counselors. If you have teachers who possibly call in sick because their child is sick, we have an app that works very, very quickly where the teacher could just set up service for that morning. They literally can do it at 1 in the morning if their child gets sick, so that's something that I can answer any questions on at another time. But our main 2 goals tonight are to inform you of our tutoring services, what we offer. That would be the 2nd page. And the 1st page, what we're now doing within private and public schools locally, which we're very proud of. So just our basic tutoring services, we offer something called weekly homework help on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. It's kind of like a gym membership, so a student does have sort of the jurisdiction to decide whether and when they attend. It does help develop self-autonomy. There are 2 tutors available nightly. They're experts in all subjects, so every single subject they can tutor for the students. And so they're allotted that monthly. It's a great program. It also helps with socialization. A lot of our socially anxious students have had great strides with it. We offer customized tutoring for any and every subject, AP, IB, basic, honors, special needs, any type, organizational skills, anything like that. 3rd, we also offer personal editing for college scholarship essays, help with admissions essays. I have quite a background in that as well, so we work to answer any questions that parents and students may have. 4th, we also offer ACT/SAT sessions, both one-on-one and weekly boot camps. We've seen great strides. One no requirement to sign up with us, but we're really, really proud of that, and that's a primary goal that we want to offer Dunlap as our main base as well. And I also create a score report for admin, which is probably most important to you and your teachers because it can be connected to your guys' classrooms as teachers, where I put together a student breakdown by year, and then an overall breakdown for the school compared to benchmark national testing. So we wanted to, speak with the board and the public. We already speak with principals and counselors almost on a monthly basis. So we wanted to bring awareness to you, and if you guys have any questions, just let me know. My information is on the sheet, and if there's anyone out there that has any questions, just let me know. Tony knows me, you can get my number from him. Thank you, board.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the board? Okay, seeing no one, that will conclude the public participation portion, and we'll now move on to information discussion items. The school activity account reports are included in the board packet. Are there any questions? Information regarding the high school random drug testing for the month of December is available in the packet. Are there any questions? Next, Mrs. Bowman will present information regarding the middle school enrichment program.
Let me get this pulled up. So we've had a committee, since I started in the district, the middle school teachers have always said that we would like to reevaluate our enrichment processes at the middle school level. And so really last spring, we sat down with those teachers when we went through the qualification process, and we said, it's time, we really need to take a look at what's going on with our process. And a big part of that is because while our assessments that we give our children are very, self-explanatory, the formula that we plug them into provides a Z-score, and oftentimes that can be very complicated to communicate. And so we feel that a more straightforward process would be better to help that communication process and help parents and students really understand why their child did or did not qualify for our enriched courses. So, with that being said, we really took a look with the committee at what the main focuses need to be. And the 4 C's are something that we're always talking about anywhere at any of our levels of education, but those are really imperative for these courses. And we want to make sure that along with our power literature and our enriched math courses that we're challenging our students, we're providing a rigorous curriculum that is helping prepare them for that next level, and then help them be prepared for those different honors or AP level courses. So that was a focus throughout the committee's time together. We do have, I believe, one teacher here, Kathy Carson. Is it Kathy? Would you mind waiting? Thanks. She's one of our power literature teachers over at DMS. And I'm not sure why this isn't loading. No? Let's try another. Sorry, guys.
I think it must be
Hey, Dr. Helms, can you turn that microphone off for a second?
Here we go. Sorry, we'll just go right to the source. So we had a committee of 8 different teachers, 4 from each of the middle school buildings, 2 power literature teachers, 2 enriched math teachers. Mr. Wolven was our building level administrator that served, and then myself and Mr. Andrews as well. So we really took a look at a 2-step approach, and we took a look at some other districts and what they were doing for their enrichment qualification across the state, and this is a pretty common approach that has taken place. So the new process that we developed with the teachers was, first, it's a broad level qualification process, so all students are a part of it. And it's taking a look at, do they have a 90% average in their current ELA or math course, or both? Is their STAR math or reading test at a 75 percentile or higher? And then are they getting a 4 or a 5 on the Illinois Assessment of Readiness? That's the new name for PARC. So we put both in there just for communication purposes because not everybody's quite at that terminology there yet, and wanted to make sure that that was clear. We did run some test data with some of our current students through this portion of the process as well. We had the teachers take current students that are in their power literature or their enriched math courses, and then also some students that aren't in our current advanced level courses to see how they would come out, some other higher performing students. and 85% of those students that were not in our current enriched courses passed this level, this step 1 portion of the process. So we felt that that was a good barometer for us to make sure we're not making the criteria too difficult either, which was an important piece. And then step 2 of the process then, so if they passed step 1, they would go on to step 2. And this is where it changes a little bit from what we currently do. Currently, all of our students at grades 2, 4, and 6 take the COGAT test. The COGAT is an aptitude test. It's not an achievement test. So the majority of the tests that our students take are achievement tests. It's measuring what their current levels are. COGAT is more of a predictor of success. It takes a look at specific areas that will they be more successful in math or will they be more successful in ELA or both. So it predicts some of that aptitude for success. So then the COGAT would be administered to just those students who passed step 1. Now a great question that came up and was sent to me was, well, the COGAT's only currently given at grades 2, 4, and 6. How would that look? We would change when that's administered. It would then be given to students in grade 5 and 7 as well if they had not already previously qualified for that but had passed step 1 in those grade levels. And you can do that with COGAT because, again, it's that aptitude test and the scores are based off of their age. It's not for specific grade levels. So that would definitely be doable and could take a look at those different areas. From there, they would also need to satisfy a local assessment piece. We've had a math local assessment piece in place for some of the grade levels, but not all. So this would add it to all of those grade levels. And then also added a writing component for ELA. That was something, our power literature courses are very writing intensive, and we've been taking a look at writing across the district. So really wanted to have that as a part of that process to help provide students with that feedback and gauge what their writing ability is. And then the other portion that we took a look at was the teacher recommendation. They would need to score 85% or higher of the new process in place for that, and we'll get into those specifics. The other piece that we put in place with this is currently there are no annual requalification requirements, and so once a student is in enriched courses, they're in. Unfortunately, sometimes there might be a student who's really struggling and for some reason maybe does need to change levels. And so we talked about having 84% or higher in their respective courses or both, whichever they're in, maintaining that 75th percentile in their STAR test, which again, we took a look at that data, pretty doable, and then continue to score that 4 or 5 on the IAR or the PARC. We also did take a look at our current students to see where their scores were on last year's PARC, last year's STAR, and it's very comparable. I mean, it's the majority of students would be able to stay, and it doesn't pull a bunch of students out of there. Move-in students is also always something we want to make sure that we're giving them the opportunity to qualify for these courses. So students that move in over the summer, they would have that 2-step process as well. We wouldn't be reliant on their grades necessarily because sometimes those records don't come immediately and you wouldn't want to hold somebody back because of that. So took a look at some of that information there as well. So pretty comparable. Teacher recommendation, I'm going to let Matt talk a little bit about because this has changed. Our form currently was very simple, and so we've expanded upon that to make it a little more complex. So I'll let him share some info on that.
Sure, for this, it's called the, and I have to look at it because it's a really long acronym, as you can see. The scales for rating the behavioral characteristics of superior students, and this is something that I actually got from reaching out to Indian Prairie School District, and this is what they use for their enrichment program identification there as well. But just some background, it was created in 1976 by Joseph Renzulli, and since then it's been case studied continuously and improved, and there are different batteries of characteristics you can administer, and we selected learning, creativity, and motivation, and those would be for ELA consideration. So 35 total traits would be looked at and would be done for students wanting to qualify for ELA, 10 for math. There is a separate one that's math specific, and they're rated on a 4-point scale. And then just gave you some sample traits for each of those batteries for learning. For example, it has the ability to make generalizations about the world, as they would otherwise need to be able to talk about generalizations and how they're represented within text. Creativity as well, an adventurous spirit or willingness to take risks, being able to go outside, the otherwise, metaphorical box and really experiment and not feel afraid to do so. We want students sure that's not going to be such an issue, but it's not the norm. And then motivation, of course, persistent when pursuing goals. Want to make sure that they'll be ready for the coursework, as we know, is pretty labor intensive in those courses. And then for math, again, there are just 3 here, but organizes data and information, discover mathematical patterns, displays a strong number sense. When solving a math problem, can switch strategies easily if appropriate or necessary. And while it's longer than it has been in the past, again, this would only be administered in 5th grade teachers. For rising 5th graders, will only have to complete it for those students who would complete the first step. You wouldn't have one completed for every single 5th grader and 6th grader and 7th grader. And then this is the scale that we came up with when taking a look at it. We were able to borrow pretty heavily from India Curry and really Renzulli, who came up with the battery in terms of what behaviors teachers can look at when rating it to make sure that they are identifying them appropriately as either seldom or never, occasionally, to considerable degree, and consistency. And then we also then talked about what it really meant when we're talking about seldom or never. So percentage-wise, we knew that that's the frequency to which they should be displaying those behaviors.
So this would be our timeline of when things would take place. And so the reason we're sharing this with you now, so that you have a good understanding, is this spring we'll go through our regular qualification process, but we will follow what's been done in the past. We wouldn't utilize this new system because it hasn't been given to parents and students, it hasn't been communicated to them. But what our goal is, what the committee talked about, is we would run our old qualification process for next school year, qualify students under that. But we would also run this as almost a test to ensure that we're still qualifying the number of students that we feel truly qualified. It would give us a chance to see if there were any errors with our process. Sometimes you just don't know until you're actually going through it with the real data if it's going to provide us with what we're looking for. And we're really looking to more accurately identify those students who qualify for these courses. So this would kind of be the time frame of when everything takes place, but wanted to make sure you understood that for this spring, we would still go under the old qualification process. It would be for next year, this new process.
Would 5th graders this year still take that COGAT?
Yes.
Okay.
5th grade this year, no. This year would just strictly be our 2nd, 4th, and 6th grade students, as we've done in the past, because it's the old qualification process.
So, but you wouldn't do the new qualification process with it and use the COGAT, or?
I spoke wrong, sorry.
That's
For the
okay.
students who passed step 1 in 5th
Right.
grade, yes,
Okay,
then they
thanks.
would take it. Correct. Yes. Lot to keep track of, sorry.
And so for the new process, they have to meet all 3 of those in the 2nd step, the COGAT, the teacher recommendation, and what was the 3rd one?
The COGAT, the teacher recommendation,
And the local assessment.
and the local assessment. Now, if we were to go through that this spring and we're noticing a marked difference in the number of students that we qualify, we would obviously reevaluate and see, do we need to make adjustments to the process for next year? And then we would have to just make sure that prior to the school year starting, we were communicating that out to families so that they were aware of that. What other questions are there?
That's a good process.
Yeah, the teachers really provided some great input. They were a great group to work with, and really, they know their students, and they provide a great curriculum for them, and so it was great to work with them and get this hammered out.
So on the English part, I was just wondering about that creativity section. What if you have a kid who is not the creative sort, but is more of a technical, factual, but
Sure. So
they get dinged for that?
I mean, their rating may not necessarily be as high, and within the behavior characteristics handbook, there are different behaviors that would be associated with them. I don't remember them off the top of my head, but it's not necessarily always that they're an extrovert in doing so, but there are other ways that can be measured and that they display those creative characteristics.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for doing that work, because Dawn and I have been here long haul, 8 years, and we've accomplished a lot of things, and I think this is one of the last things that I really was interested in. As you know, Heather, that's probably the first thing I said to you when I met you. I mean, it's both in the math and reading and things that we can do, not only in the middle school, but I would encourage you to continue that into the elementary school to help those students grow and potentially, create more.
Yep, we want to make sure we're meeting all their needs.
Right.
Any other questions? Nice job, thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Information regarding proposed revisions to the 2019-20 student handbooks is included in the board packet. The assistant principals are available to answer questions. Are there questions? I already had a ton of questions that I already got answered today, so. But if anybody else has any others. The one I talked about with them the most, or I talked to Heather about the most, was the sequencing and course selection and the wording on whether or not parents had the ability to make those choices, or was that an administrative or staff decision. So I think the wording that we came up with was that we just got that today. So can you read that sentence?
Mr. Adrian,
Okay.
right in front of you.
Yeah, if you don't mind reading it.
Parents have the opportunity to select their students' courses and sequencing, provided the students meet the prerequisites for desired courses. Class size may limit access to courses as well. Students with higher class grade standing, for example, senior, junior, sophomore, and freshman, will have preferences. So if you've got if we're at an overload, we're maxing, getting to the maximum number of students in that class, if the student needs that, they are the higher preference they would get. So it still gives parents the opportunity to choose those classes, but there's some classes they can't choose for reasons they get prerequisite to be in there. Like a freshman could come in and choose going to calculus, but if they're not recommended for honors, they still have the choice to be in honors, 911 or honors.
And so then it will be listed for the AP classes. Will there be prerequisites for that, or should we add something in there that says and selected AP classes, because freshmen can't participate in AP?
I'm not sure that's necessary.
Okay.
Right now we have several classes where sophomores can't take the AP.
Okay.
We've been working the last 6 to 7 weeks on a 3-year plan, academic plan. So I think we made a lot of progress on that. We hope to have that to you for February for discussion.
Okay.
And that is included 4 additional AP courses over the next 3 years. And our next phase of this discussion is to talk about the access we can provide for lower level students to some of those courses.
Okay.
And then we also have to, like you said, evaluate our summer school impact on those kids and see how that's, now we've got 2 years of data, how that's loosening up the Rubik's Cube, so to speak, and now there may be some other ways to shuffle those kids into some classes. So
Yeah.
that's
I guess-
really changed the game.
Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. I guess my question technically is, when we say except in cases where there's a prerequisite or room, there would also be another exception, though, technically this next year, would be that some AP classes are not available to the freshmen and sophomores.
True.
Right? So I don't know if a line needs to be added in there or a phrase.
I think that would be in the course offerings handbook, under each of the courses where it lists the different
Okay.
prerequisites, that information is all.
Oh,
in
so there
for
will
that.
be a prerequisite for
Right,
that.
and that's what he's talking about, we've been working on that 3-year plan, what courses can we loosen up to offer to other grade
Okay.
levels and change some of those prerequisites, what ones still need to stay the same for now, and then over the next several years, where will adjustments be made?
Okay.
Well, we're excited about that 3-year plan for you guys to view it, so we have discussions to make sure that's the direction we want to head, because it is a lot of work to align all the courses and everything that everybody would like to see in there, so.
So you're saying you want input now, or
No, when we give you
when
that
you
plan
give it?
discussion,
Okay,
I don't
okay.
know if it's actually going to have any, it's not going to require any action,
Okay,
but the discussion, the feedback that we get from you, we could bring back a revised plan if that's not exactly the way you want it, doesn't encompass all the courses you'd like. We can have some more dialogue, that'll give us a lot more direction on the way we go.
and when you do that, will you also be looking at resource management and civics to
Yeah.
see if those can be taken?
Yeah, when you brought that, we're looking at that right now.
Oh, good, okay, great. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah.
No, I just
Okay.
have one question. I know that we, and this is, when we look at the handbook, and I'm not sure, so when we're looking to have the students take ownership, right, and, just be responsible and work on this a lot themselves, just the sentence, the way it reads, when you say parents have the opportunity to select their students' courses, does that, I don't know, is it just me, or does anybody else, it's like the parents are, you're gonna take this and you're gonna take that. I just don't, when the students are reading this, do they feel like there's ownership and that they are part of the selection process the way this handbook reads?
Or we can say families.
I don't know if it's just like parents, students, or, you know, and I don't know, and are the counselors a part of that? You know, are we still doing a partnership where?
How many students complete schedules as drafts? They don't know it, but they're drafts.
Right.
When they turn in, the parent can change the schedule. But yeah, we do try to teach, you know, self-advocacy and so forth. We can change it, the families have the input. I mean, the
Or
students-
parents and
Or parents and
students.
students, or just so that the students don't read it and they're like, well, here, mom, go make my schedule. You know, we want you to understand what you're taking and that you will be actively in those courses and you should have a say in that.
Yeah, we can fix it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to go through the curriculum hand guide right now, and you are saying that they do listed, in here should be listed the prerequisites, they should be already here. Are there, even besides the prerequisite, like skills necessary to complete? And I can only speak to this, one example would be maybe Algebra 2, not honors, regular Algebra 2, jumping into honors, trig, and pre-calc. I don't know if there's any math teachers in here. I don't know if the regular honors Algebra 2 has enough trig in that class to jump into the other. So if skills were listed, perhaps students could work on that over the summer, or if they get tutors, if they really wanted to make that jump into the honors, trig, and pre-calc. Does that make sense? How about if I talk to you afterwards?
Yeah, and I also think that that's really where it's imperative, where students are in communication with their
Yeah.
counselors, and they're saying, okay, this is what I'm in, this is what I want to take next year, and then that's when they would work with them, and then work with you, put them in contact with the math teacher to say, hey,
Right.
these are the skills you really need to
You
focus on
right,
if you
right,
want to
right,
make this jump. So,
Right, because if you don't get those skills, you're not going to, I mean, initially in that class, it's going to be really difficult, I think.
right,
And
sometimes it's a conversation, but we
yeah,
can talk.
okay, okay.
I also had a question about the sports section, about the line added about playing up, and this is for middle school. Are we on middle school?
We can, but yeah.
Okay, we're on all handbooks, okay. Please go to So that sentence just seems to limit a student's ability to play up to only be emergency situations. Guess I need to look at Katie. I was just wondering, how are have the coaches been? What is their feeling on this? I was just wondering if if it was appropriate for a kid to play up for skill.
So we talked about this last week because there had been discussions about it 3-4 years ago. And so we actually, or at least I thought, because I was a coach at that time, that there had actually been something added to the handbook. And so we went through it and figured out that it had not, because there have been a couple of instances in the middle school, athletic directors who might speak more to this, about basically, I think we were just trying to make sure that both middle schools were on the same page as far as what the practices were going to be, what they were going to do.
So does this mean? So this means that if a child cannot play up based on skill, or what does it mean?
At this point, like we discussed yesterday at the handbook meeting, the idea behind this is that we had the athletic leadership team or committee 3 or 4 years ago that met, and we talked about this information, and we talked about where do we want to be, how we want things to look as a district. And so that has been our practice for, like Katie said, the last 3 or 4 years. However, we have realized that there's nothing actually put in the handbooks, whether it's a student
Yeah, and I guess I was,
I would add to that,
Mhm.
the coaches during that leadership committee meeting of that group, the cut sport coaches that have cut sports, basketball, volleyball, for boys and girls, were pretty adamant about not playing kids up
oh, okay.
to build numbers.
Mhm.
And because the minute an eighth grader plays up, you back up, the seventh grader plays up,
Mhm.
you're taking minutes from somebody.
And I didn't know if it would change based on our schools now being more the same size, you know, if we would not have the numbers issues, or, you know, I just don't know. If there's an instance where there's a kid who's so skilled that it's in that kid's best interest to play up, I don't know if you see
The
that.
high school coaches, though, made it very clear
Okay.
during that conversation that they prefer kids not play up to build numbers.
For middle school,
Absolutely.
okay.
And I just would add, as a new administrator who wasn't here 3-4 years ago, that I appreciated Antonio, Jason, Katie, everybody getting together. Tasha's not able to be here to speak to the middle school. She's actually supervising the game tonight. So I wanted to speak from Dunlap Middle's, I guess, perspective to say that we appreciated the opportunity to sit down so that we could put the practice and the policy that helps, Tasha and I to be able to say, okay, these are the things that are in writing. It's not just in the practice.
Okay.
From those conversations. So definitely.
And I was on those committee meetings, so I do echo what
Okay.
gentleman.
I just wanted to ask. Okay, thank you. Any other questions about handbook revisions?
Was there a board member that sat on the handbook?
I did.
You did,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, and Beth covered for me one meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Information regarding the 2019-2020 student fees is included in the board packet. Dr. Dierman will present this information.
I think it was Teresa very early on when correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was Teresa had asked if, to look at fees and just do a comparable. So that was in response, and I looked at the fees. Mr. Hackett helped gather that information, reached out to some colleagues, did it for the Mid-Illini Conference. It makes sense, that's the conference that we're in. We like to compete against them athletically, academically, everything else, so I thought it was a fair comparison. They're very similar to us as far as size and whatnot. There's really nothing in those fees that kind of stood out to me as, we're not the highest, not the lowest. We're pretty much where we should be. So I have no recommendations to change the fees. I think they're fine as is, and to continue those as is for next year as well.
We did something similar to this. I actually just came across it 5 years ago when we went through the budget deficit and compared ourselves to the schools, and we were just to put ourselves in line with what everyone was. And I think we were really somewhat. We raised a few, but for the most part.
And it's difficult because not everybody does everything the same way, so there's some other fees that may or may not show up in here, but as a whole, as you look at it, we're very comparable to our member districts.
Driver's ed, I think, was the biggest discrepancy.
We were the
from what
lowest.
I recall. Yeah.
You can go up to $250, I believe, in driver's ed now, and we're the lowest at 50.
One of the lowest, right?
Right, I think there's one other school,
Yeah.
two others, they're at 50.
Well, one at 50, one at 0, if that's right.
East Peoria and Washington.
Yeah. But thank you for doing that. As you look at it, we're just, we're above on some, below on other, but we're right where we should be, I believe. So thank you for doing that.
No problem.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next, Dr. Dierman will present information regarding the proposed 2019-2020 school calendar.
Not much to propose here. I'm getting a little frustrated. We're still waiting for the legislature to make a decision. There is a bill put forth being backed by IEA and IFT. Those are the two teachers' unions, to revert back to the 5-hour is a day and serve a lunch requirement for attendance. As I look at our current calendar that we're under now, and I'm proposing basically the same calendar next year, there's only 2 days that could really affect, and that's the parent-teacher conference night. Students aren't in attendance on those days. Under the current law, we can use those as buzzwords engagement, and we have a lot of online learning capacity here throughout the district, multiple levels, and even with the lower grades, as long as we can show that students have some type of engagement activity scheduled for those days, we could do an online or, students learn in different ways nowadays and embrace that opportunity. If the law changes, we can't do that anymore. Same thing with and we'll have to have this discussion at a later point once they make a determination which way this is going to go, is the snow days, or emergency days that are put on the end, the 5 days. Technically, you don't have to make those up. Now, if you're out of school, if we're out of school tomorrow because of weather, if we had something in place now to have our students engaged, we don't have to make that day up. That is the law as it currently stands. And if it continues, I'm okay with the 2 days. My recommendation would be for the 2 days for the parent-teacher. I think it would be a good opportunity for us to embrace that opportunity and engage our students in a non-traditional manner. But if we have a bad snow year and we have 5 snow days, I'm not so certain at this point that our 5 days additional online engagement, non-traditional setting equates to a full week's worth of instruction in the classroom in front of the teacher. So that's a conversation that we'll need to have if and when we get to that point. I would suggest we make those snow days up as we always have. The teaching days are exactly the same. The new law states it has to be 176 student attendance days. We have that with the new calendar, so we'll be fine. We're at 174 right now with the current contract, but that includes the 4 teachers institutes and then the 4 SIP half days. You put those together, you get the 2 additional for the 6 to get you to 180. So we've got some latitude there. We'll see what comes out of Springfield. I don't have a crystal ball.
Question. So
Yeah.
that doesn't affect funding then, if they allow us not to make up those snow days, it's still ADA, it doesn't impact our school funding?
As long as we can show that they were engaged, and there is no time limit. If they log into campus for 2 minutes and log out, that's a day. If they're on there for 10 hours, that's still 1 day. We just have to demonstrate that. And we'll have to work through that when that time comes, but I really don't see that being much of a challenge for us with the level of technology that we have available to our students.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. This concludes the information discussion item segment of the meeting. The board will now move on to the consent agenda. Are there any questions or discussion regarding items on the consent agenda? Can I please have a motion to approve the...
Wait, 1 second, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I had questions regarding E on the consent agenda because it never came for information. And I think I got some of those answered, but Scott, were you going to give us any additional information on E?
Sure. With E, that's coaches attending a football clinic.
E is proposed student fees, am I wrong?
No, on the consent.
On the consent. Oh, on the consent, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page. Got it.
That clinic is in Las Vegas. The coaches are paying their own airfare to get there. If we table this and don't vote on it or approve them to go, the clinic actually occurs before our next meeting, so that's why it was on here, to try and get information to you now. It's actually cheaper when you look at total costs from what I've been told for them to actually go to Vegas, since they're paying their own airfare, than what we typically pay for them to attend the camps in Illinois. These are camps that these coaches go to every year. This one just happens to be in Vegas. That's about all the information I have at this point.
Wasn't it in Vegas last year? It's always in Vegas, isn't it?
They've gone for a couple years.
Yeah.
It was St. Louis before that.
Oh, okay,
Chicago
okay,
before
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's the same type of, it's called a leisure clinic. They also happen to do this year, the Nike Coach of the Year clinics, where they bring all the big college football coaches are out there for that, the same days as well.
Yeah, because they offer it at all those locations every year, right? Like St. Louis, Chicago.
Sure.
Like it's like in several cities. And I guess the question I had is there's only 2 people going, and there's 2 separate conferences. And I think the activity fee is covering the registration. So are both coaches registering for both conferences, or is one going to one? This seems like a lot to take in for 2 days and pay for 2 registrations for 2 people.
So the registrations is actually, you buy like for the Glaciers, you buy like a staff pass. So then they can go to this one, and then if they decide on the Saturday or Chicago one that they want to go there, they can go to that as well.
then the only other question I had was just so we keep a track of the cost, so that we know how much we're paying to send coaches, because I know there's been other coaches in other sports may want to go on, you know, there's clinics in every sport. I'm sure and they're valuable for every sport. So just so we can, just like we do with fees and everything else, so we can kind of make sure that we're looking at holistically, you know, and knowing who gets to go, who doesn't get to go, and that there's criteria.
Yeah, I just sent 6 other coaches to workshops last week.
Okay.
They just didn't have to go for approval because it was up in the Chicago area. And so, yeah, I have all that runs through my budget and stuff, just because I think it's, you know, important for them to be continuing to go to clinics and continuing their education and stuff like that.
All right, and I appreciate it. And the only reason why I had those questions out is because it didn't come for information.
Sure.
So, and I know it was a timing issue, but, you know, generally we get it for information, we can ask the questions, and then we bring it for approval. So, and I understand that it's taking place before the next meetings.
So I have one request along that, possibly when they come back, if they could kind of give us a quick summary of how it went and what they learned kind of deal, how if it was worthwhile.
Sure. I'd like to
For
hear
all
what's-
the coaches
But-
clinics that they go to?
Well, I don't know, just this one in particular potentially, it'd be kind of nice to see it with the value.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding the consent agenda items? Okay, if I could have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda as presented. I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
It's been moved by Abby Humble, seconded by Cheryl Bluth. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Humbles? Blue?
Aye.
Bozeman?
Aye.
Disharum?
Aye.
Olshauser? Reed?
Aye.
Samwick?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We'll now move on to the action items. The bill list, treasurer's report, and district investment report are included in the board packet. Are there any questions? Okay, could I have a motion to approve payment of the bills?
I move to approve payment of the bills in the amount of $4,031,591.47 as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Brian Zowen, seconded by Teresa Holzhauser. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Zowen?
Aye.
Olshauser? Aye. Bozeman?
Aye.
Disharum?
Aye.
Humbles? Reed?
Aye.
Blue?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. This concludes the action item portion of the meeting, and we'll now move into closed session. Thank you all for attending. Could I have a motion to adjourn to closed session?
I move to adjourn to closed session for the following purpose as stated in the Open Meetings Act. The appointment, employment, compensation, and the performance of specific employees, student disciplinary cases, discussion of meetings, minutes of meetings lawfully closed, security procedures, and collective negotiating matters.
It's been moved by Beth Reed, seconded by Abby Humbles. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Reed?
Aye.
Humbles? Disharum?
Aye.
Olshauser? Zowen?
Aye.
Blue?
Aye.
Bozeman?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Set? Okay, could I have a motion to approve the human resource consent agenda? Could I have a motion to approve the human resource consent agenda?
Second?
It's been moved by Abby Humble, seconded by Cheryl Bluth. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Humbles? Blue?
Aye.
Reed?
Aye.
Zowen?
Aye.
Bozeman?
Aye.
Disharum?
Aye.
Olshauser?
Aye.
Motion carries. Could I have a motion to approve the closed session minutes?
I move to approve the closed session minutes of the regular board meeting of December 19th, 2018 as presented.
Second?
It's been moved by Dawn Bozeman, seconded by Teresa Holzhauser. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Bozeman?
Aye.
Olshauser? Reed?
Aye.
Zowen?
Aye.
Blue?
Aye.
Disharum?
Aye.
Humbles?
Okay, motion carries. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
It's been moved by Cheryl Bluth. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Dawn Bozeman. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned at 7.
You guys want to pass your stuff down?
Clear. Okay.
Name tag down, please.
Oh, yeah.